Welcome to the Football Chris Show, where my name fits conveniently in the initials.
That was a disgusting performance.
On this show, we cover the hottest topics around the FCS each and every week.
Yeah, it's my job to get them ready. I'm running around like trying to get them jacked up.
If you could do us a favor, if you're listening in podcast form, could you please leave us a 5-star rating?
I don't know. I don't have an answer for you, bud.
I think in general it was a pretty uninspired day.
If you're watching on YouTube and Sam Herder hates your team, leave us a like and smash the subscribe button.
If you call Nick, you know you'll get cussed out on the spot. So don't do that. Treat me like Nick.
Oh, and one last thing before you enjoy the show.
One last thing. Tell them to bring me my money.
This show is an affiliate show of FCS Fans Nation Network.
I mean, I'm going to be as frank as I can be. I'm glad it's over.
Well, happy hump day, everybody, and welcome to the Football Chris Show, because my name fits conveniently in the middle. I know you just heard all that in the intro. But today, like no other day before it, the Campbell Camels decided to own this day like never before. The Campbell Camels announced a few hours ago that they will be joining the Colonial Athletic Association for the 2023 football season. I know, we just thought we got done with conference realignment, at least until next offseason. But the Camels did not agree with that, everybody. The Camels are trying to make a statement, and they did today on Hump Day. I promise that's the last pun I'm going to use about Camels and Hump Day now. And we're going to talk about what this means for the CAA, what this means for Campbell, and what this means for the FCS as a whole. Obviously, with the news being new, I don't really have a guest today, so you're kind of getting a solo Football Chris show. So hopefully you guys like it. If you do, hit the little thumb, please. But let's talk about what this means. And if you want more, I'm obviously going to plug our good friend at Hero Sports. Sam Herder has an article on it, but there's articles everywhere about it. The addition of Campbell, they'll be joining in July 1st of 2023, which means they will be playing the 2022 season in the Big South, their current home. But this will bring the CAA to 15 members. 15 members. Keep that number in mind because that is a wild number. But let's start with what this means for Campbell. Campbell is going into their 14th season since refounding football in 2008. This is a new program. Campbell, I know, has been down a lot, spending a couple seasons in the Big South, but they've really, as of late, had some success, right? They did go 0-4 in the spring season, but you know they've come on. In 2019, they went 6-5. 2018, 6-5. 2017, 6-5. They've been around a 500, then they're 5-5, 5-6, 5-7. So they've come on, and it's a startup program. It's not a Kennesaw State per se. It's not a UTSA per se, a Coastal Carolina per se. But Campbell is following suit of kind of those schools and their rapid ascension along the football ranks. You look at Kennesaw State, who also was in the Big South with Campbell and has now moved to the ASUN Conference. You look at UTSA, who played a few seasons and then went straight up to the Sun Belt. The WAC. You look at Coastal, played a couple seasons, had some success. Now they're in the Sun Belt. So it's not unheard of for some of these new teams to have meteoric rises. Is that what Campbell is? Maybe. They definitely have become more popular in recent years than they probably were a decade ago. I don't think people before the 2012 season, when they went 1-10, they were coming off a 6-5 season in 2011. I don't think a lot of people were talking about the Campbell Camels in 2012. Now, circa 2022, they make the biggest news since USC and UCLA on the conference realignment front. We had not had a single team move conferences since UCLA, and UCLA announced that back in June. So this is kind of a big deal for, well, the FCS and, you know, Campbell and the CAA and the conferences trying to compete with them, like the SoCon and the Big Sky in the Missouri Valley. Speaking of which, you find it interesting that the Campbell Camels are actually an affiliate member of the Southern Conference. Their wrestling program participates in the SoCon. So it's interesting that they decide to go the CAA versus SoCon. Now, I wonder if you knocked on the right doors or asked the right people or had the right rooms bugged. I would assume they might have reached out to the SoCon first due to that affiliate membership. However, as we know, and you'll find out in tomorrow's episode, the SoCon has always been a traditional conference. It's really hard to get an invite to that conference, and they still hold themselves up there with like their former members of like, Clemson, Vanderbilt, some of those SEC, ACC powers that started out in the SoCon conference. Now, Campbell, I think you can unequivocally say this is probably a good thing, especially when you look at what happens now that they've left. Unfortunately, this takes the Big South down to only 4 members: Bryant, Charleston Southern, Gardner Webb, and Robert Morris. And if we're being honest with ourselves, that's probably not going to stay around much longer because the Big South needs 7 teams to be able to get an automatic qualifying spot into the FCS playoffs. Lucky for them, the old OVC is also sitting at 6 teams, with Eastern Illinois, Lindenwood, Southeastern Missouri, Tennessee State, Tennessee Tech, and UT Martin. Now, I think it's safe to say the Big South has got a lot of room or work in front of it if it wants to stay alive. Because right now, I mean, people say the Pac-12 is dead. People said the Big 12 was dead last year. The Big South looks dead. At this point, a Big South OVC merger is needed. If not, the Big South could get picked over by the ASUN Conference, which already picked over a lot of the OVC and the Southland to create their current footprint and the Big South. Really, it's a great mash of kind of those 2 of these conferences that are struggling at the moment. It's an interesting move. It's created the Big South and the OVC have announced, I guess, possibly an alignment agreement. The league will be down members in 2023. However, the Big South and OVC announced an association starting in 2023 where they will combine for one playoff auto bid, much like we talked about with Will Seiler on the ASUN preview about how the WAC and the ASUN partner because together they don't have enough automatic. You have to have 7 teams, and they don't have that as from FCS teams with like Sam Houston and Jacksonville State making the transition to the FBS. You see this at this level with the likes of Campbell, Monmouth, and all those teams making the transition now to the CAA, which is just wild. And when we talk about it, the quote from Commissioner Joe D'Antonio of the Colonial Athletic Association: "We are excited to welcome the Campbell University as the newest member of the CAA. Campbell is an outstanding academic institution, check, and features successful and competitive athletic programs." Recently. Both of these attributed to fit perfectly into the conference's vision that calls for our members to work together to advance national competitive athletic programs, coupled with the outstanding academic programs that empower student athletes as whole persons to strive at the highest level in each of their respective lives. The CAA continues to be focused on making decisions that ensure our membership as competitive and sustainable model, which at 15 teams is highly debatable if 15 is considered a sustainable model. Now, it's not unheard of. Missouri Valley is large. The Big Sky used to be a lot larger than it currently is. So I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing. They could be in years down the road. We could talk about how they were ahead of the curve, expanding to 15 teams at the FCS level. It just feels like at the FCS level, when you're not allowed a conference championship game like you are at the FBS level, where you see teams like the SEC and the Big Ten now at 16 teams in the coming seasons. Previously, the Big Ten at 14, which makes no sense, but then the Big 12 had 10 teams. Just another reason to follow the FCS and not the FBS. But you just look at this as it could be ahead of its time or it could not be. It's kind of the same idea with the CAA's current TV arrangement, which is being negotiated. We've heard could be changing, but they're currently on Flow Sports. Somebody like me, the only reason I would have Flow Sports is specifically to watch the CAA play football, which I'm just not willing to pay what their subscription fee is for 3 months of entertainment. Now, I've had people push back on me and say, well, do you like motorsports or wrestling? Then it makes more sense. You probably already have it. Except F1's on ESPN, Supercross is on Fox, wrestling is on Fox USA and TNT, and like every Warner property ever, I believe. So it's hard for me to really buy that. A lot of people already have flow sports. I mean, you got to be a diehard like motocross or go-kart racing or whatever kind of motorsports are on there to have that. And I just don't know if there's a huge crossover there between FCS fans and those kinds of sports fans, where the average day person like me, who's a huge college football fan, can admit that the only way I follow the FC or flow sports, the CAA, is through FCS Fans Nation's Facebook page, YouTube highlights, and whatever Sam Herder or Craig Haley posts about these teams in their media coverage of the national landscape of the FCS. So I think this is just such a weird move for the CAA, which I think we'll go into. I think it's a good move for Campbell. I don't think anybody's going to argue that. So I'm going to move on to the CAA side of this. It brings their membership to 15 teams. Their 15 teams now will be Albany, Campbell, Delaware, Elon, Hampton, Maine, Monmouth, New Hampshire, North Carolina A&T, Rhode Island, Richmond, Stony Brook, Townsend, Villanova, William, and Mary. That is a large conference that also spreads all the way from Maine now to North Carolina, which is, I get it. You know, James Madison was in Virginia. It's a footprint. And being a big Sky guy, I mean, we have everything from Montana to San Luis Obispo. We have everything from Portland to Flagstaff, Arizona. So I get it. Like, footprints can be big. But I just look at the CAA and go, but does the CAA need to be this big? Here's my analogy that we'll see how my line of thought is able to keep it together. Let's put it that way. The CAA, in my opinion, and if anybody is a fan of the CAA or one of these teams and knows more, comment down below, inform everybody that watches this why I'm wrong, please, or if you work for the conference or one of these athletic departments. But it feels like the CAA was that conference that, was in the Power Three or Big Three or whatever we call it here at the FCS level. And, they were doing good. They'd gone to a couple natties. They had the real beautiful girl, James Madison, at their side. And they were hanging out with the cool kids, the Missouri Valley, the Big Sky. And then all of a sudden, their girl decides that she wants to go date this guy at a different school, better looking guy at a different school, arguably better looking, but at a different school, basically circa the Sun Belt and the FBS. James Madison, who had taken them to their most recent titles, won their most recent title, decides that they're maybe a little too good for the good old CAA and wants to try somebody at a different school. And so they are now dating the Fun Belt Conference and the FBS. And the CAA's response to this seems to be, I'm going to try to flirt with and date as many other girls as possible to make up for that loss of the one, prettiest girl at the moment, being James Madison. And it's just an interesting strategy. They're like looking at, well, this girl plays this sport, or this girl has this colored eyes, or this girl is 4.0 student, or whatever. This is where this analogy is incredibly falling apart. I'm aware of that and becoming very, I don't know, not with modern times, but I'm doing a rush. This just happened today. You're going to have to live with it here. And I'm sure I'll get to a point where it just feels to me like, I don't know, they had a roster in hand, per se, of, I don't want to say ex-girlfriends. The analogy's gone. I'm just going with it. Why are you trying to replace James Madison with basically some unproven teams? Yes, NC and A&T have had some success. Yes, Campbell has been good recently. Yes, Monmouth had some good years in the Big South. But you're trying to tell me that that's the way to backfill a conference that possesses national champion winning teams like Richmond and Villanova. You're trying to replace it with teams that have had recent, in Delaware, and you have teams that have recent bouts of success like Townsend. You even have teams that are really on the upswing, like a William and Mary. Albany is a team that's had some recent success. Golly, Elon, like, they have so much. They have Rhode Island, who's an upswing team. They have New Hampshire, who used to be a perennial playoff team that's just in a little bit of a slump. I think the CAA could have spent more time focusing on how to support their current institutions. And honestly, with the loss of James Madison, created a better footprint, arguably, for the conference as a whole, because it became more of a northeastern centric conference with its outlier and William and Mary and Elon. But most of the conference was up north. And you saw that in the 2020 COVID seasoning where they put them kind of in their pools. I just think the CAA is a conference that has so many, don't want to say blue blood because I did a whole episode about blue bloods, but I want to say well-known teams. You have state institutions like Rhode Island, like Maine. You've got big schools and popular schools like Albany that are a huge lacrosse school. It's just, it feels desperate, I guess is what I'm getting at. It feels very desperate of the CAA to get to this point where they're reaching out to just basically former Big South teams that, other than Monmouth, who won it, haven't really, they're not Kennesaw. This isn't grabbing Kennesaw. This is grabbing a chance school, and a school that I'm not sure could be competitive against what they would consider their worst membership teams at the moment, like an Albany or a Towson. It just, if I'm the CAA, I don't know how this is a win. And I really hope somebody down below can explain to me how this is a win. I know there's the safety and numbers thing that during conference realignment, if somebody were to get picked over, at least you don't have to worry about that as much anymore because, everybody is, you lose a team like the Big Sky loses Southern Utah, you're fine. You're actually the healthier number. And if that's what they're going for here, then congratulations. They basically have set it up to where they could lose 6 teams and be a healthy conference. And they could lose 8 teams and still technically have a playoff spot. But is that also pointing out that you may be too large when you can lose 8 teams and still qualify for the playoffs when the Big South is sitting there and has to pair with another conference to be able to play for the playoffs? It just seems so unnecessary and just another way of college athletics getting a little wonky. Now, Campbell, I think, is a good fit. It's like I said, it's nothing against Campbell as a program. I just don't know what 15 teams does to benefit the CAA. And I think if you look at it, anybody with half a sense would be like, they're not done expanding. Why would you sit at 15 teams? That is going to make for I can't wait to see the 2023 conference schedule and how they decide who plays anybody. 15 teams in a FCS schedule where you only play 11 teams, not 12. So you're probably only playing 8 conference games. So 7. You're going to play at one team, if my math's right. You're only going to play one of the teams every 4 years. Is that fun as a conference member? Let's say who picks up the mantle for the Dukes. Let's say it's Villanova. Let's just say Villanova gets back to power. If you're Campbell and you're not on their side of the pool or however they're going to do this, or maybe they'll do it straight up, and you don't play Campbell or Villanova every 4 years, it makes this move a little less enticing. You want to play the big schools. The teams in the Missouri Valley, they don't want to play NDSU, but they want to play NDSU. That's a big draw, especially at home. I worry about the size of the conference when you're not allowed to have a conference title game being at 15. And I could be completely off base with this. This is going to be a quicker episode because it's more breaking news today than it is an actual podcast episode. But I do find it weird. Just some takeaways. Campbell, not SoCon member, even though they're an affiliate member of the SoCon. Good for Campbell. Good for Campbell. They're a program on the rise. I mean, they're not even 20 years old as a football program, and they're already will be on their 3rd conference and elevated every single time. The CAA, it's going to be interesting to see what this means for them in terms of scheduling, if this helps at all with the TV deal. The biggest takeaway is question mark CAA, and we're just going to need more information to come out about it from Commissioner Joe D'Antonio about what this is for the CAA. Yes, they want to find like-minded institutions, but I need a better explanation, which could come out while I'm editing this video, right? Because this is just a flash of the moment. News came out, edited video, put it out there so we have somebody and something to talk about. So make sure you talk about it down in the comments below. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Hey, thank you guys so much for making it to the end of this video. Us here at FCS Fans Nation Network are pushing 1,000 subscribers on the YouTube page. We really want to get there. If you've made it this far, you might as well hit the subscribe button in the middle of the screen or down below. We would really appreciate it. And while you're at it, there's a couple other videos up on the screen. Might as well give them a listen too. You don't know who else on the network you'll like.